Alright, so y'all go ahead and do the factoring and the math knowledge question for today. Pause the video, and then once everyone is finished, you can unpause the video, and I'll go over the correct answers. So for the factoring, you're going to do remove, replace, reduce. So you'll have x squared minus 20x plus 100. When you replace and factor, you'll have 4x minus 10 times 4x minus 10, both of which divided by 2, which will give you 2x minus 5 times 2x minus 5. Or you can write that as 2x minus 5 squared. For the math knowledge question, the probability of an event happening or not happening is always going to add up to 1. So E is going to be your answer. If you have a 25% chance of something happening, that means you have a 75% chance of it not happening. And so that's going to always add up to 100%, or just a 1 if you write it as a number instead of as a percentage. Okay, so we're looking at lesson 43 today. We're going to be looking at periodic functions and then graphs of sine and cosine. But before we do that, you're going to do your third trig quiz. So y'all go ahead and get those out. Make sure they're face down on your desk. And then y'all pause the video until everybody's ready. All right, now that everybody's ready, we're going to take 5 minutes. On your mark, get set, go. so y'all put your pencils down. Make sure to go put those in the basket. And then once y'all are ready, we're going to go on with lesson 43. So we're looking at periodic functions and graphs of sine and cosine. So hopefully after this lesson you understand how periodic functions and the graphs of sine and cosine work. Alright, so looking at periodic functions. For some functions, the graphs of them have a repeating pattern, and they are called periodic functions. The most important periodic functions are the sine and cosine. They are going to repeat over and over and over again. In mathematics, we're going to use the word sinusoid to describe a curve that looks like a sine curve. So a sinusoid is going to be a sine curve. But both sine and cosine are actually called sinusoids because they both look very similar. And so those are both two examples of periodic functions, and specifically they're called sinusoids. This is the graph of y equals sine of theta. I want y'all to pause the video and graph this in your notes. You're going to need to learn what this graph looks like. Right now, we're just going to be identifying the graph. Later, you're actually going to have to draw it out by hand, much later in the year. But right now, you need to learn what the graph looks like. So it goes up and down and up and down. It's a wave. It repeats over and over and over and over again. It goes up to 1 and down to -1. Sine is going through the center. Sine, center. Sine is going up through the center, through the origin. Okay? The amplitude, it goes up and down. The function is 1 because it goes up to 1 and then down to -1. If it went up to 2, then the amplitude would be 2. And then the period is 360 or 2 pi. Okay, so 360 or 2 pi. It goes 1 period is 1 complete up and down and up. And that's where, once it gets here, it would start repeating again. So this is 1 period, and it goes from 0 to 360. You can start anywhere for your period. I could have started here, and then if I went down and up, and I stop here, that's a total of 360 degrees. So this is a graph of sine. You just graphed it a few minutes ago. This is the graph of negative sine. If you want to graph it, you can. You don't have to. But the only difference is sine is going up through the center. Negative sine is going down through the center. Okay, this is the graph of cosine of theta. I want y'all to pause the video and graph it. It's another one that you're going to need to learn how to graph later on in the year. So at the center, cosine is hitting a maximum, but it still has the same wave. It goes up and down and up and down and up and down over and over and over and over again. But cosine hits a maximum at the origin. And then negative cosine hits a minimum at the origin. So those are the 4 basic ones that we're going to be looking at. So if you want to graph all 4 of them in your notes, you can, but the 2 on the left are the ones that you really, really need. Okay, so this is the graph of y equals 2 sine of theta. And the reason it's a 2, it goes all the way up to 2 and down to -2. And it's always going to go up and down the same amount. So if it goes up 4, it's going to go down 4. This one is the graph of -2 cosine of theta. It's negative because it hits a minimum at the origin, and then its amplitude, it goes up and down 2. So let's see if we can make the equation for this sinusoid. So the first thing we need to figure out, what is the amplitude? Well, it goes from 0 up to 6. So it's going to be a 6, and then it starts at the origin and it goes up. So that means that it's a positive sinusoid. So y equals 6 sine of theta. And we know it's theta because that says theta right there. Okay, let's look at another one. We want to write the equation for this sinusoid. So y equals, we started at 0 and we went up 3. So it's going to be a 3 for the amplitude. And then we are at a minimum at the origin. So that means that it's a negative cosine. And this one is an x because there's an x right there. So this equation would be y equals negative 3 cosine of x. So that's how you write the equations for sinusoids. Okay? There are two things you're working on right now. Identifying the amplitude and the function, whether it's sine or cosine. So your homework is 1 through 30. There aren't any to omit tonight. Your next trig quiz is going to be with lesson 46. It's going to be the last one. It's going to be identical to the other three. So keep studying your unit circle.